Oh man, thank you for your time and for taking your time to help composers worldwide. Actually,
Oh, it's always fun. This one's a double whammy because well, it's a triple whammy
mm.
because um, the obvious thing, yes, I of course greatly value putting things out there that could be of use to other composers. But in particular, these folks, the Game Music Festival folks, Mariusz and the rest of the contingent of our friends from Wroclaw, are have been very good to me, and I'm all too happy to support what they're doing. I wish I was just messaging with Gareth saying, I really did genuinely look at the calendar to see if there was a way to come.
Mhm.
It felt like a worthy getaway, but alas, just too much stuff going on pulling me away. But then
Yeah,
the third thing is obviously any excuse to hang with you.
yeah, man.
I get 3 wins out of this just by showing up. So I'm good.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it for real. And so, in the service of helping out, young composers and all that stuff, we are doing this. I have some questions that I'm going to ask you. And I'm going to be just somebody, and this is kind of true for myself as well. I want to ask you questions from the perspective of somebody who wants to get in the video game music industry, but hasn't gotten there yet. And these questions are not going to be on a technical level, because I believe that, hey, getting good at music, there's so many resources for that online. But understanding the mindsets that are necessary to be successful in this field is a completely different beast. And it's something that is not talked about often, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I
that's
fully agree. I think that the technical stuff is what's emphasized a lot in educational programs. Like if you go to university to study about video game music and film music and things, there's always a lot of emphasis on the technology, the software, the craft. I remember when I was in school, there was so much emphasis placed on the timing of your cues to picture. It was almost single-mindedly, it seemed like, about this idea of how do you choose your tempo and meter and all that in order to kind of elegantly fit the picture. And then as soon as I started doing my first scores, I realized all of that is so secondary,
yeah.
but it's so much more teachable. It's so much more. It's closer to an objective thing as well. The technical stuff of like, well, do you know how to use Pro Tools? Yes or no? That therefore fits an academic environment where they like to be able to give you scores and grade you and be able to demonstrate that they've empowered you with XYZ skills,
Mhm.
whereas thinking about the sort of philosophy of art is much harder to impart and also much harder for them to self-evaluate if they've successfully communicated it. So it makes sense, but yeah, I think the technical stuff is the least interesting part. And also, to your point about there's resources online, you could go one better. I always encourage composers to kind of get to know their peers and develop a circle of friends of people that are kind of all sort of mutually have each other's back, because it happens all the time where, you know, perfect example. I'm working on a thing right now where we're recording everything in Pro Tools, but we have to be using different recording studios all over the world, really, but really all over the U.S. And there's this one studio in Hawaii that I was told this is going to be where one of the next sessions takes place. And I got a hold of the engineer, and he'd never done anything like this before. He had good microphones, but he was like, by the way, I record in Logic. And I was like, well, I
Oh.
haven't opened Logic in 15 years. I don't even have it installed on my computer. I don't use Logic. And so I just called a friend of mine and I said, hey, if I were to send you a Pro Tools session, could you basically rebuild it in Logic and then just save it as a zip file I can send to this guy and he can just open it up and it will be as if he's working in Pro Tools from my angle, and then he'll send it back and then I give it back to you and then you translate it back again into Pro Tools. And he was like,
Right.
sure, not a problem. And like that's what I mean, where school would have you believe these are all things you have to know yourself. And of course, the more you know, the better. I'm always an advocate of that. But like, develop a network of friends who you can help and they can help you,
Oh man,
because
this.
that solves all the technical problems.
Yeah, and this also helps with, say, like you need some crazy cellist on a track. Hey, maybe don't have time to learn cello, but maybe you're friends with Tina, and you can
We
ask
all
her.
can't. Yeah, we all can't make a. We all can't make a consistently viral Twitter feed out of our learning base. So
Yeah,
yes,
also. But
Yeah.
yeah, as usual, whenever we do our interviews and stuff, I always forget to introduce you because I just start from the idea that everybody knows you. But
Well, right
hello,
back at you.
everybody. My name is Alex, and I'm here with my friend Austin Wintory, legendary composer who's made music for so many video games at this point. One of the most notable ones being Journey. He's done Assassin's Creed, Syndicate, Banner Saga, The Pathless. But not only that, Austin is also a film composer and just composer in general for any type of media, and very well versed. Has a big understanding of his craft, but the most interesting thing is like his mindset, and I think the way that he lends himself to whatever project he's working on without much ego at all. And that's something that I can learn from and that I think everybody can learn from. So thank you, Austin, for being here with us.
You're very generous. The privilege is mine. It's I really genuinely love talking to you, and in a way, I love that we do these, and we've done a few now with more on the horizon.
Yeah.
But it's funny because let the record show that we talk quite a lot outside of our televised broadcast versions, and you're one of those folks that just consistently asks interesting questions and asks, and I don't mean like asks of me, like you ponder interesting ideas.
Thank you, man.
and then it ends up being a thing we kick around for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I just love it. So the kindness reflected right back at you as somebody who is a real force for good. I stand. I will die on that hill.
Thank you, man. So Austin also has a YouTube channel where he teaches composers many interesting things. He breaks down his own music, his own video game music and stuff, but also he has so many interesting videos about mindset, and he interviews fellow composers like Peter McCrary, Lina Rain, all these big names. So he has a lot of knowledge to give, and that's why we're here. So I have a few questions that I like to ask you that should keep us busy for at least 1 hour.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm just gonna shoot them randomly at you. The first one that I wrote up is as an experienced composer in the industry, I'm sure that what you thought working in the video game and film industry before getting in it was probably different than what you found out it is. So what are the top 3 things that you wish you knew before you started working in the video game industry and in the film industry?
Well, the first one that comes to mind under the banner of wish I knew was, and I haven't been especially sort of hampered by this, so it's a little bit wish I knew. Feels like things could have been so much better if I'd only known X or Y, and I've only reasons to feel lucky and grateful for my career. So taking slight issue with accepting the phrasing of the question, something that I remember very much growing up, and then when I went to school and started studying this stuff more formally, was that because there's these heroic, legendary examples of the John Williams and the Jerry Goldsmiths and James Horners, and more recently the Hans Zimmers and the Danny Elfmans, etc., that are used as the focal point of a lot of education. There's this constant framing of, you're going to land a movie, and then you're going to have to figure out how to budget an orchestra, and then manage several days of recording and mixing, and everything was spoken about in this very, you will just assuredly be working on grand budgeted, very kind of comparable to these masters. And then you get the reality check of, I just landed my first film, and a feature film has like $100 for an hour of music.
Wow.
There is no discussion of orchestra. There is no like, this is what can you pull off with you and your, as Hans Zimmer said, with a rock and 2 sticks or whatever. Like, what can you do? So I remember thinking, once I'd been in the business a couple of years, that particularly the academic world, but by extension the world of seminars and workshops and film festivals where someone would come and there'd be a panel of composers talking about the business, all the various ways the composers might learn. So much of it represented the kind of top 10% of the reality of what composers deal with only.
Right.
And had no sense of what is it like. Now, I think that's changing. This because I was in school, I started my formal education about this stuff almost 20 years ago. And I sort of like officially finished with that part of my life and was off and running in, maybe 15, 16 years ago. So like, a lot's changed about the way this stuff is taught, in part because I think they have to react to the universities and things like that have to react to the presence of YouTube and channels like yours and theoretically, hopefully, channels like mine that offer alternative resources far more democratically, as it were. So I think that, there was always a sense of, oh yeah, it's gonna be just like when you watch the behind the scenes on Jurassic Park and you see John Williams in front of the orchestra. That's more or less what you can expect to find in Hollywood.
So it's like they promise a grand adventure, but you start the game at level 1 with the wooden sword. And
yes, exactly.
Eventually you get there, but it takes a long time, right?
And I wouldn't have it any other way. I like the fact that, for example, you have to be creative and you have to figure out ways to work within incredible limitations for, especially at the beginning of your career. But that's something that
makes it easier.
Happens forever.
Can make it easier because, like, if you're given infinite options from the start, you really don't know what to do. You feel paralyzed, right? So it's good to start small. It forces you to think. If money is no object, I think a lot of people would have a hard time resisting the temptation to just give it the full Williams treatment or the full Zimmer treatment. Whereas the odds of them developing their own treatment, where they just because they don't have any other option, is a better scenario, I would argue. Right.
So that you asked for 3. I don't know that I can come up with 3, but I can. The first one that actually came to mind, but it doesn't really. It doesn't really. I don't know if it works under the full version of the question of something that I kind of wish I had known, but just something that I
think it wouldn't, like, you would still go at it the same way, I suppose. Like, it's not something that would change. Like, if they told you, oh, you're going to have to work your way up, kiddo, it's not like you were going to change your mind.
Yeah.
But at least you were going to be prepared into, the mindset that you were, like, did you struggle? I don't see you struggling with this at all, but as a younger composer, did you struggle with that? Did you feel like, man, I've been working my ass off so much, and now I have to start from scratch? Do you struggle with humility?
Well, that's the thing. I always anticipated being, for all intents and purposes, I always anticipated being a nobody that was owed nothing. I had to prove myself. I remember when I was a kid, my dad always used to say, "The hungry wolf hunts best." And I thought that's the right philosophy. I don't want to be given any favors or have things handed to me. I wouldn't have necessarily articulated it that way. I don't want to represent as if I was some sage guru or something. But I definitely had no expectation. It was just like, well, I was just like, well, let's see how to get started. I don't really know what to do. Well, let's just try stuff. Right. And I tried a million strategies to get the ball rolling, and gradually things start to take on mass. So I definitely wouldn't have done anything different. I guess to clarify what I meant by that first answer was, it's not that I was surprised to discover I would have to start at ground zero. I always expected that. It's that the reality of what ground zero type projects are much, much, much more Spartan than certainly the academic world would have you believe. They represent Hollywood by its most glamorous, public-facing and successful examples.
Yeah, I mean, they have to sell, right? They're not gonna be like, this is gonna be hard even after you're done with school. And that's one thing that I'm like, man, I think about this a lot. I think, like, this goes into our next question, by the way. And I don't want to cut you out, by the way, but I'm just trying to lead into what. Let me add one other little thing then.
that was, and then we'll move to the next one. But the only other thing that was, I think, worth injecting there is something I did not know until I was here, and particularly LA. But really, I think this would hold true anywhere. And it really would equally apply to film or TV or games or whatever. But when you grow up, like I was a kid, I was growing up in Colorado. I didn't know any, like none of my classmates, for example, wanted to be composers or anything like that. That was something, I was very much an anomaly. There were a lot of talented musicians like in the school orchestra and stuff, but they all, either were just good and did it as a hobby or wanted to go be performers or whatever. Mm-hmm. I was the only one who really kind of fit this particular mold. And it wasn't because it's just composers are reasonably rare. And when you live outside of these creative hubs, you're just a more endangered species. That's just a law of averages at work. That's nothing special about you. So I didn't really know what to expect about the actual cultural realities of the business. And one of the things that I was really charmed by when I first moved to LA, especially after hearing things like, oh, Hollywood, it's so fake, you better watch your back, blah, blah, blah. There's cliches that were omnipresent. And people would even say to me, especially when I lived in New York and all these defensive New Yorkers go, what are you doing moving to LA for when New York is where it is, this is such a, New York's a real town. Don't move to some fucking, like as Woody Allen said, Hollywood, 100 miles wide, but an inch deep. That was such the portrayal. And what I discovered when I moved here was that it is wildly untrue. Is that not only that, but the vast majority of what is packaged as Hollywood's output, whether it's film or TV or to a degree games, although I don't really think of games as necessarily a Hollywood industry, even though it's Hollywood adjacent, but film and TV in particular, the vast majority of what you see when you turn on Netflix or when you go to a movie theater is made by people that are in, middle-class houses or apartments or sharing an apartment with roommates and working long hours and weekends and like going to a coffee shop and splitting the $10 bill with each other. Like it is for as much, not to make this about class, but like for as much money as one can earn, the majority of the people, the editors, the cinematographers, the directors even, and God knows the thousands and thousands of actors that are waiting tables, the majority of it are fundamentally normal working class people that are not multi-gazillionaires. And that group collectively makes up like 99% of the industry because it's less than 1% that become the Tom Cruise or Steven Spielberg or Hans Zimmers. And so most of what you see is like when you're watching, this for some reason, what comes to mind, but like you watch, I'll just say any random thing you pull up on Netflix, by and large, if you stay through to the end credits, hundreds of names go by.
Oh yeah.
Those are all like people that are at the diners and at the, the Denny's and the like, and again.
Yeah. And also there's loads of people in Hollywood who are like one thing that I hate to see online is when people start to think that just because you're successful, you're less kind and stuff. There's lots of people who are super successful who are super kind, like you. Like you're a very kind-hearted person and all this stuff. So in my
the directors that hire them versus the team that they turn around and hire. And there's
Yeah.
lots that could theoretically be unpacked there, although a lot of it ends up being hearsay and rumor mill more than anything beyond that. But I don't want to be overly rose tinted and be like everything is perfect and amazing, and anybody that dare
No, but
disagree
it's
is unrealistic.
less
That's not
dark
true.
than what people think is what you're trying to say. Like
I
the
think
image.
absolutely, and also I just loved that, like, the average person that I would work with on a thing, and this is true even of people that are very successful financially. It's like, hey, do you want to go to? Well, it's shut down now. But do you want to go to a movie? I was gonna say the ArcLight, the holiest theater in LA. But you want to go down to the Dome, or you want to go to the gallery and catch a movie together, and then we walk to a coffee shop and we like debate about it, and that's what people do anywhere. But there's just a flavor, there's a fever for that more here than average, and I found myself so intoxicated by the culture, the fact that it was a lot of people who were just passionate about the work and were willing to put in a lot of work to try to achieve something really meaningful that they're proud of, and seeing their name go by, in the credits as the 6,000th person. Like I remember going, my friend Justin, who got his dream job from the Netherlands, moves to LA to pursue work in VFX, makes his way, goes to New Zealand for a few years, works at Weta on the Hobbit films, and then he's the biggest Star Wars nerd ever, and he gets his dream job at ILM to work on The Force Awakens. And and his shot that he was personally responsible for became the signature shot of the Star Destroyer crashed into the sand that they opened the trailer with. That was his baby. They were like, give us some wreckage, and he made that thing. And he I remember he would text me from ILM and he'd be like, Dennis Murin just walked by, like the god of VFX who's been there for decades and still working there. And he would just be blown away that this is his life. And so I remember we went at like 1 a.m, opening day to Force Awakens. There was a group of maybe 7 or 8 of us. And I sat with him and I was like, will you poke me every time one of your shots goes by on the movie? And then we sat there and, 40 million people work on a movie like that. But sure enough, when the block of here are the compositors from the visual effects and his name goes by, there's like 8 of us that are cheering, and there's like other pockets of that going on in the theater with like other people there with their friends. And I just think that's what Hollywood is. It's not, yes, Hollywood is also red carpets and blah, 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 blah. But that's the minority of it. The majority is stuff like this where you just cheer on your friend that they landed a great job, and it's usually not that great a job, and you're still thrilled for them. And I love that. I will never get tired of that. No amount of cynicism or the difficulties or the rises and falls of the industry or challenges to income and all those things. Yes, those are all real things, but like at the end of the day, it's so kept afloat by people that just come from a place of loving it, and I never get sick of being exposed.
I guess you're able to see it that way, especially because of the first answer you gave me, where you were like, well, I went into this not expecting that the world owed me anything. I suppose people who are like, oh, Hollywood is fake, Hollywood is this, it's terrible, probably expected something from it just by being there, and just because they're there and it doesn't happen, then they felt like, oh, I feel betrayed. This is not what I was promised, and all this stuff. So probably having
that is a
mindset,
common problem.
Yeah, I think having the mindset that you have is perfect for having the stamina to do this long term, and then eventually get to the point where you got or your friend got and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I appreciate you indulging my. I know that's all still your first question, so I'll be more succinct, I promise. But
it's fine because that goes to the second question, which is surely in music, and I have had experience of this as well. Like when I started out as a composer or musician, I remember I was in I didn't go to music school, sadly, but in my neighborhood there were some friends that I knew that also were producing music and stuff, and we were all in it. But I was the only one to actually make it. And throughout my journey, I've met so many people who were doing the same thing as me. Oh man, you're making music too. Yeah, there's no musicians, composers in Italy and all that, And I met so many people who were even far beyond my skills. But then I exceeded them and I became, so much better and went to places that they didn't reach and they couldn't reach because I think they didn't have the right mindset. And I'm wondering, like, surely the same thing must have happened to you in music school. You must have met lots of people who probably were even more talented than you, but then they haven't arrived to the points where you did. And
Oh yeah.
I think that's probably 97% of people who get stopped by something. What do you think? What do you think is that something? Is there some mindset you see or some habit you see in 97% of composers in the world that doesn't allow them to reach their dreams?
I
Because
think
there's
there's
so many people like that. I'm like, man, that's hard.
I think there's two halves to that.
Hmm.
Because I definitely think that the attitude that one brings is a massive sort of force multiplier, where the opportunities that come along will be more numerous and you'll be more aware of them. People will gravitate to you more, which creates itself more opportunities. If you're projecting to the world around you that you're excited, you're here to help, if you're coming at it less from the angle of how can you serve me, but I serve you,
Oh man, that's huge.
that has a tendency to, it has a tendency to pay dividends. And that's why I always have this whole shtick I have about how much I hate the word and the concept of networking, because networking is a fundamentally inauthentic act. It's about meeting people with the sole purpose of determining how they can help you on the ladder.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just go and act like a non-sociopathic human being who just wants to meet people and get along and make friends and like populate your one and only little flicker of a life with people that mean something to you and to whom you mean something, then some subset of them may end up yielding professional opportunities, but the main goal is just surrounding yourself with effectively loved ones or friends. And the ones that end up yielding career opportunities will be in some unpredictable group, as a small group within that. And if you're trying to only find the small group within, you're going to end up with nobody in all likelihood. So and I think then you get all disgruntled to say, oh well, it's the industry's fault. It's like in The Simpsons with Skinner going, nope, the children are wrong. Like, I think the attitude is definitely a big part. But I will say this. Like, I know people that, as you said, that were more talented than me, maybe even worked harder than me, and had a great attitude, and I still somehow have gone places that they didn't go. Which to me is also proof that there is a certain element of it that is just dumb luck. And I never want to lose sight of the fact that like if I hadn't, perfect example. My dream was to go to the University of Southern California. It had such a reputation for this being they had a great music program, and it even had a great program that specialized in teaching film scoring, and I didn't know it at the time, but they were even starting to add video game scoring to it. But it was well known as like, I mean, the number of legendary professors, Jerry Goldsmith had helped teach this program, and David Raxon, Charlie Chaplin's composer had taught at this program. Like, it was a legendary educational environment, and you're in LA. But the main reason I was excited is that in the film school, 2 doors down on the same campus, was the same magnetic hub of all the young filmmakers. So it was like the next Steven Spielberg is likely just right there. I want to be where that person is. So that was my dream. And I remember I applied to that school in high school. When I was in high school and doing the college application thing, I applied to USC, and I didn't get in. They let me into the university as an undeclared major, but the music school said no. I was rejected. And I had simultaneously applied to NYU thinking I'm not realistically going to end up going to NYU. And NYU did accept me. So it was like, I guess I can roll the dice and just go to USC and hope that, I can get in my second year, which also then automatically commits me to a 5-year university, which I did not want to do for a million reasons. But the NYU, meanwhile, said, we'll take you. So it was like, well, I guess I'll go where I'm welcome. Well, so that set in motion a cascade of things. First off, I connected with family members that I didn't even know existed when I moved to New York. My grandfather called me and said, my cousins, who I didn't know he had cousins, they were all in their 70s and 80s. He said, my cousins who came when we fled Nazi Germany in 1938 from Berlin, they still live in New York. They did the Ellis Island, refugee thing. And my grandfather and his parents moved to the deep south to Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is still hilarious to me. But their cousins stayed in Manhattan and lived like the classic, immigrant story in New York. I didn't know these people existed. I had no contact with them until I was 18. And then I then lived in New York for 2 years and had dinner with them every Friday without fail. And then went back repeatedly to visit them until they eventually died. It was brother and sister who lived like a few blocks apart from each other on the Upper East Side. And these were people who had lived history. And, I mean, Siggy, he literally was in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. I mean, like, these were people that had firsthand experience of some of the most seminal world-altering events. They were beaten in the streets by the Hitler Youth. I mean, it was like, and I had no concept of their existence. And so having that, I mean, you could not see it that well, but that painting right there is by the sister Sonia. She was a reclusive painter who lived in the same Manhattan apartment for like 45 years and rarely left. Like she just painted. It was full of paintings, and I'm very lucky that I have a lot of them. And she was this artist. She completely changed my outlook on life. I mean, she was literally. I can't imagine who I would be today without this huge influence of constant exposure to her in particular, but also her brother for those 2 years. So it's like, but that's purely kind of personal, although to the degree to which that informs my professional life thereafter is hard to measure, but I'm sure it does.
Yeah, that's the thing. You cannot measure it, but surely it had, like, it's a determining factor.
Absolutely. So then I feel like I'd run my course with NYU, great school. Manhattan is amazing, but I could tell after a year, I really am. I belong in LA. I just know it in my bones. So I started applying for transfer, and USC very explicitly said, we don't take transfer students. You can apply, but like the odds are nearly zero. I applied anyway. By some miracle, I got in. So after 2 years, I transferred to USC and was able to do 2 years at each school. And I love NYU. I stand by NYU. I do things for their faculty and their student body all the time, master classes or whatever. Like, I don't consider it a school I was running away from. It was just, I really wanted to be in LA. And so here's the funny thing. The reason why I'm telling this story, forgive my being so indulgent with the details, but here's the why I say it sometimes really is just dumb luck. I didn't want to go to NYU, and fate, as it were, intervened and made me go to NYU. And then I came to USC and they said, all right, look, we'll accept you as a transfer, but you basically, there's no way that you're getting out of here in 2 years because you have to do the 4-year course load still. There's a few things that you will test out of, or your credits will transfer over from NYU, but like not as much as you'd think. So I still finished in 2 years because I just said, I'm just going to load my course load. I did summer school. I was like, I really don't want to, for financial and life reasons, I don't want to be here for that much more time. But I'll give it everything I have to try to finish in 2 years. Well, so one of the things that I had to do was the performance requirement. Every composer, even though as a composition student, most of my classes were, orchestration and blah, 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 theory, those kinds of things. There was one semester of performance that you still had to have because all music majors had to have at least one semester of performance. Well, I was a mediocre pianist. I had spent all my time learning to conduct since I was 14, and they don't let you use that as your performance, as the way to satisfy the performance degree. So the only option that was really left for me was to join the bottom of the barrel crap men's choir, because there was one choir that was it was a non-audition choir. It was like basically the dumping ground for all the people that just needed to satisfy the degree requirement of performing in an ensemble. So half the men's choir were fellow composition majors because we were in similar positions. So I joined the men's choir, and then part of the men's choir is we had to put on one concert. And it was like, who's going to come to the bad men's? And it was at like noon on a Thursday. But I remember there was one random guy in the audience, and I went and talked to him because I was like, I want to know who is like stupid enough to come to this. So there was a guy there, and he was a student in a program I didn't know existed, which was USC's. It was the first, I think, of its kind in the world, a master's degree in video game design. And he was there because there was also a women's choir, and he was dating a girl in the women's choir. But this guy, he was studying video game design, and I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought that all video games were made by people who had been like computer science or programming.
Oh, right, okay. So he unlocked your world.
Yeah, this was so. I gave him my card, and I was like, dude, if you ever want to do stuff together, let's do it. And sure enough, he followed through, and I did his student games. But then the thing that fundamentally and completely and totally changed my life was that a classmate of his then said, hey, I'm looking for a composer for my master's thesis. Does anybody know anybody? He recommended me. And so then I got a cold call from Genova Chen, his classmate, who was looking for a composer for what later we called Flow, and which was the beginning of that game company. And if I had gotten into USC when I initially wanted, I would have done that choir thing 2 years earlier, and I would have never crossed paths with this guy.
Man, that's
and I would
crazy.
almost certainly have never met Genova.
And you worked on Journey together, right? Eventually.
Yes, they founded that game company, and that led to Journey. And everything about my career, and the whole reason we're talking right now, is because of what Journey kind of unlocked. I say all that. I know I'm being super long-winded, but the point is,
that's a beautiful example. Yeah, that's
I can't take credit for basically anything in that story, other than me introducing myself to the stranger.
Here's the thing: you can take credit of the fact that you did the best you could with what you had. There's lots of people who would have been like, "Oh, I cannot go to USC. Well, fuck it. This dream is useless. I'm not gonna go to NYU." You know, or there's lots of people who would not have been open to like, oh, you have this, these relatives that you don't know anything about. Oh, I don't know anything about. I'm not gonna go. There's people who like that. There's people who would not have gone to speak to the one person, there watching you in the concert.
Sure.
Like, you took a lot of action. You were proactive about all of it, and then.
But it could also have easily just been a random nice guy, and we hung out, and we had a nice time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we went
it's not like. But listen, dude, like. So many beautiful things in my life, even our friendship, came from small moments like this, where, it can be just a comment. It can be just, you go talk to somebody. It can be just, I don't know. Oh, yeah. Taking part in this man choir. Like, you never know where things come from, right? So I think like one thing that I really am starting to believe in is the idea of if you have to do something, don't half-ass it. Just do it 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Something I've read in Matthew McConaughey's biography. He's because of his parents, he always has this mindset of like, don't half-ass anything you do, because how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I think that's a very important story. And many people, by this time, they're going to be like, oh man, I thought I was going to get video game advice. I'm going to turn this off. But those who are still listening, I think will learn a lot from this, because this is the stuff
you're probably right.
This is stuff that really makes a difference, though. That's the thing.
I just always, it's not comforting to realize how much we are beholden to randomness and to luck, because like you said, there are people that are wickedly talented. I mean, I was at USC and graduating. I started there in 2005. 1 year later, and I met a lot of student directors. And 1 year later, in the class right after mine was Ludwig Göransson, and he met Ryan Coogler, who was a student director. He met him the same way that I met all the student directors that I worked with, and that led to them doing. What was that movie called? Crap, I'm forgetting that. The first movie that they did that had Michael B. Jordan, and it was like a Sundance kind of darling, and it launched all their careers and led to them doing Creed, and of course, Black Panther, and everything that's happened to him after. Like, Ludwig was one of 20 composers in his class, and so like there's 19 others in that class who are not him. And like, yes, he's outrageously talented and unbelievably friendly and the most profoundly egoless guy you could ever hope to meet. He's I can't say anything negative about him. He's great, and I think he's one of the best composers in the business today, irrespective of age or anything. He deserves everything that has happened for him. But like, if he hadn't connected with Ryan Coogler, everything would be different about his career from what we recognize today. Although, but curiously,
again, like this happens when people. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to say again, like this happens when people are connecting for real and not like just networking, as we talked before, right?
For sure.
You never know, because I know, like, we cannot stress that enough. Because, dude, people don't get it. I don't think people truly understand the idea of just making friends and then by serendipitous chance, maybe you end up working on something together with them. Like, it's so freaking important. It happened to me, the same thing. Like, I'm not working on big movies and stuff, but hey, I think 99% of all the success I've had would have been impossible without my friends. And I didn't know when I met them that they would be responsible for it. It's just, just happened. And I'm the same. Like, hey, I've helped so many of my friends succeed in their own journeys. So it's so important. Yeah. But yeah, sorry.
The movie, by the way, Fruitvale Station was the name of the movie I was trying to. It was driving me crazy. I had to look it up.
Okay. I have
a budget of $900,000. It says
$900,000
was the budget of that movie. Yeah.
Wow.
Which in movie terms is incredibly tiny.
Really?
But
man, I know nothing about this. That's crazy. I thought there was.
Yeah, I mean, 900,000 is. I mean, there are plenty of movies that are made for less, and I've scored movies for a fraction of that. But it's still that's micro budget indie. That's one of those where that's basically getting you very basic locations and camera packages and things. That's not big indulgent for any department. It's hard costs. 900 will get you a movie that looks like a real movie and doesn't look low budget, but in trade, everybody's working for pennies. There's just no way to indulgently make a movie for 900,000.
There's a few questions I want to go from here. One of them is something that is probably going to be on the minds of those who are listening right now, who are probably like, this is all cool, but I work from the internet. Maybe I'm in Venezuela. I cannot just go to America and stuff. Is there a way for me to achieve that, like connect with people and make friends, etc.? Like, what have you, like, you work with many composers, many composers up and coming and stuff. Have you noticed, or do you have a story to share about some of the people that have made their big break from the internet? Or, that made...
Well, I mean, you're a great example. Rachel Hardy is another person who I just love and who is a great example of someone who just kind of charted her own path and built up a YouTube presence, and then completely on a whim entered the Spitfire Westworld competition and nearly won the thing, and subsequently opened all these doors, and she lives in Canada and has I think she visited LA at one point to kind of like explore some potential assistant positions or internships or whatever, but she's basically completely removed from the community here other than through the internet, and at this point knows lots of folks. An example I love, if anyone watches the video that I put out that actually has Rachel in it as well, but I did a video that's called Those First Steps about getting started, and
that was
one
an
of the guys
video.
Thanks, man. It was fun to do, and it was hard to cut down because each conversation went for like an hour and a half. So I have like 6 hours of conversation with these four talented composers, but one of them, Ariel, who's from Argentina, talks about the same thing of connecting with people essentially through the internet, but that included the Argentinian now audio director at Ubisoft that got him a job working on Far Cry 6. Wow. And so that's a perfect example where you put these things out, you connect with people, like the idea that as an Argentinian, for example, there will be other Argentinians who've kind of made their way around the world, and they find each other and they help each other, and it shouldn't all be necessarily along national lines. Like, for example,
No, but that helps. That's one thing
of course,
that
yeah,
helps.
absolutely, it gives something. It breaks the ice one way or the other. But like in your
Mm.
case, you could. How many people have you met through what you do with playing bass, where like other bassists or people
Yeah.
that are looking for a bassist or just admire that, like that gives you an entry point to people that's not necessarily front loaded by video game music or media music in general or anything,
Hmm.
or even just your like video game as fashion concept. Like that's gonna put people on your radar that wouldn't know, and you get to meet people through that lens, and that
Yeah.
kind of goes down roads that who knows where it will go. And
One
so
one
I
thing
think
one thing that I believe in deeply personally with this, like I want to share my advice too, is we're talking about this before about how in the when you want to connect with people, one thing that is good to do is to show yourself being excited about helping others. Hey, you're just excited about projects going on. You just want to help out. You don't want to be about me, 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 me.
100%.
One rule that I follow for social media personally, and that has been responsible for a huge part of my social media success lately, is to not make it about me. It's like my bass playing stuff. It in a way it is about me. I'm learning how to play bass, but the videos I could have learned how to play bass. I could do it by myself and not share any videos. But the videos I put out of me playing those riffs are to make people have a better day, to make people dance, and also to get the music that I remixed with my bass to get more popularity. So when a composer
Hey,
sees
that's
it,
the thing. It's
they're
other
like,
people's music too.
yeah, and it helps them and it helps people have a great day. Or the fashion stuff, it's like to help people who love games to discover a fashion sense and all this stuff. And also the videos on YouTube. By the way, sorry, my phone is going off. The videos
No,
on
no
YouTube
worries.
as well. My videos are to help composers get more reach and get more respect and get people to understand their music more and all the stuff, and also to help people figure out music. So it's all in the service of others. And when you do that, when you're always in service of others, I think naturally people start to appreciate you more, and they start to consider you like, hey, this guy's great. He's been helping me all along with all this stuff, all these videos. And maybe they start to give you responsibilities that are nice to have. And so that's something I think people do social media wrong. They do it about me, 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 me. Check me out. Selfie here. I did this. I did that. I'm like, that's fine. But what if you use your voice to help, others who could earn from it for free? And stuff comes out of
Mhm.
there for sure.
I couldn't agree more. To me, it's I take such genuine joy in celebrating friends and colleagues uh, through Twitter and Instagram. It's really kind
Yeah.
of mainly what I use these days, and in YouTube more and more is becoming my focus really,
Yeah.
um, for in terms of online presence, and so much of the fun of that is in just broadcasting that there's a lot of great shit, and and how exciting to have such ready access to it, and let's signal boost it, and if people like it, then great. I really couldn't agree more. Of nothing really. I'm saying nothing of substance because I have nothing to add to what you said. I
No,
totally
we
agree.
agree. We agree. So when people say about how do I get clients and stuff, do you think you have some strategies or some things you would recommend besides what we talked about? I think what we talked about already, like connect with people, make friends, get to know people, get to know about the project, get excited. This already should be, I think, in a way, all of it almost. But do you think there's something else too, like that people should do in order to advertise themselves to clients as composers? Like we're in a sphere where I'm seeing right now the Oscars don't even mention best original score
Yes, I saw
on
that.
air. So it's like the message that I'm getting is composers. There's so many of us that we are becoming almost disposable in a way, and in such a like, and when you advertise yourself as a composer online, you almost get ridiculed for it, almost like in forums and stuff. So when people are starting out and they're navigating these difficulties, they're like, what do I do? So do you think there's some things that people should do to advertise themselves?
Well, I think specifically in like the pragmatic advice, the very sort of non philosophical is You're not wrong when you say composers are disposable. I
Hmm.
am, you are, we're all readily replaceable. There's almost no, just about the only composer who may not be replaceable is like when they were starting to make Force Awakens, and if John Williams had said, I want $10 million, if they had been like, well, no, no one, like, I don't care who you are, like, he may have just been truly the only one that they go, ugh, okay, fine,
Yeah.
and like begrudgingly gone along with it, like, because I mean, as an example, the London Symphony famously recorded Star Wars, the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, but now at the age he's at, and because he doesn't do mock-ups, um, the way they worked it out on the sequel trilogy was, okay, well, you'll write music throughout all of, post production, and we'll just do recording sessions every like month or so.
Mm.
And that way, if because they won't hear it ever until the orchestra plays it, and so it's a very old school way of working. Of course, he's John Williams,
Yeah.
and so the trade off was, but John Williams said, look, I'm not moving to London, and I'm not going to fly back and forth at this stage in my life repeatedly. So he actually got Lucasfilm, which literally had never happened before, to record in LA with union Los Angeles musicians. So they recorded the sequel films in LA, which is crazy. I never thought I'd see that. And then that catalyzed, like, okay, well, I guess we'll do Mandalorian and Boba Fett here that way. And John Williams has just recorded the new theme to Obi-Wan like last week with Hollywood studio musicians. And he always loved working here. He did, tons of scores here. It's not like he only recorded in London. In fact, he mostly recorded here. Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark were noteworthy exceptions to his recording, but it was such an iconic recording. So he actually got them to change, because that obligated them to all kinds of royalties and things to the musicians union that they wouldn't have had to pay if they'd gone to London. So like that was a very expensive decision for Disney.
Do you think
to make.
that's something that we should, like, as composers, we should aspire to? Because like when I see really the Oscars not giving a shit, I mean, like, we're not gonna announce best original score on air. I'm like, I don't. For me personally, I'm like, man, I don't want to be in this position where I'm easily replaceable. But
Well,
but that comes at a cost, though. Like when you think that way, then you really have to play a game of like building your brand and your personality to a level that goes beyond music, and then you start doing things outside of music. And I'm like, is it worth it?
Well, so a few thoughts. First off, the Oscar telecast is responding to the audience. Their ratings are down every year. I mean, look at the Olympics, same thing happened. So like the Oscars, the average audience member doesn't know or care about the categories that were not included, like editing and sound effects and music. The average audience member has never heard of Jermaine Franco, who is nominated for Encanto. They've never heard of the average audience member hasn't even heard of Hans Zimmer, as hard as it is for you and I to believe that. Like this, maybe the average audience member of the Oscars would have heard of Hans Zimmer, but the average moviegoer has not heard of Hans Zimmer, and he's very famous. But so maybe like it's just not, it's fringe. They know who movie stars are. They don't even know who the directors are. Like the average movie, if I say,
they don't see the face.
Spielberg, they probably don't know. That's behind the scenes. And it's certainly, more than not will maybe have heard of Spielberg, but one down from him, who's Christopher Nolan? Like, so I think that, yes, all of our composer friends and colleagues in the last 8 hours have been huffing and puffing about the lack of music in the Oscars. And I look at it and I go, look, they are going to try to probably put other things in the show with that time that will make it worth watching. And if more people end up watching the Oscars and get excited about it, that's probably a broad win for the industry. Then it's a shame, of course. Like, there have been, composers. Michael Giacchino, I remember, gave a very beautiful speech when he won for Up, where he said, for any kid who's watching who feels like a weirdo because they like to write music and they've never met anybody, or they just like to be creative, like, I was that weirdo. Everybody else here in this room was that weirdo. Be that weirdo. Like, he had a very beautiful sentiment to any young kid that's feeling kind of odd for the fact that they like to make stuff and maybe none of their friends are quite that way. And so there have been a lot of beautiful moments that I'm glad exist in Oscar history, as it were. But at the end of the day, it doesn't determine much for us. So I think, and part two, kind of not fully off of that, but just off of what you said, I don't think it's about building ourselves up to be irreplaceable. I think that nothing we can do makes us irreplaceable. We are replaceable. And I don't mean that in a negative or cynical way. It's in the same way that, like, if I make the world's absolute greatest chocolate chip cookies, no human being alive who tasted my chocolate chip cookies and likes chocolate chip cookies would disagree that they are the best ever made. Let's just accept that as a premise. What's baked into my premise, unintentional pun there, is that only people that like chocolate chip cookies agree that mine are the greatest. What if you're a macadamia nut person? No amount of my making the world's greatest chocolate chip cookies will win you over if macadamia nuts is what you're into. In the same way that there are people that just absolutely no amount of telling them that Jerry Goldsmith is a genius will make them think that, you know, Trent Reznor is not the greatest film composer in the history of film music. And I say, great. I love that we live in a pluralistic world where people have varying points of view, and as such, different directors and producers are also human. They will have different points of view.
Yeah, they have taste.
They have taste, and it's some taste is we'll perceive it as good taste or bad taste or very, you know, kind of sophisticated taste or very, you know, low rent meat and potatoes taste or whatever.
I mean, that's a good point. You like, I think at the end of the day, if you try to please everybody and you try to, like, make sure that you're the best in everybody's minds, you're gonna be the best in no one's minds. Like, you're gonna please
almost
nobody.
Certainly.
And also, it's gonna work you, like, you're gonna be worn out by the effort, which
you will have been spending your energy on something futile. It would have been a complete waste of time, and anybody with sense could have told you that. So that's where I say embrace that you are replaceable and invest in relationships and invest in getting to know people who will go at bat for you. I mean, the number of times, you know, I remember when I was a kid, I would look at, there were certain composers where I just thought, can't everybody tell that person is just not as good as these other 50 people? Like, that's a big thing. I won't name any names. I don't want it to be like that. But
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like there are some that just, there's seemingly universal agreement that they're, like, you know, okay, or they're second rate or blah, blah, blah. But if you ask, but they're, like, phenomenally successful, huge movies or huge TV shows or what. And it's like, how could that be? And it's because, well, go ask the people that hire them what they think of that person. And they'll all say the same, guaranteed. They'll go, what a joy to hang out. I never stop laughing when we hang out. They showed up with gifts for my kids. They remembered my wife's birthday or my husband's birthday. Yeah. It's like they're the kinds of people that you want to spend time with. That's what makes you irreplaceable. And it's not that you're truly irreplaceable, but if someone just goes to bat at you because they love spending time with you, they're the kind of person that wants to, you know, go grab a drink with or a bite with or invite you to their anniversary party or their kid's wedding or blah, 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 that kind of thing. That's what makes you the only thing that could ever approach being irreplaceable.
Man, this is so important for our culture right now because I think we're forgetting that. Like, man, because, like, now lots of people relate online and all that stuff. And online, there's all this, especially on Twitter, people being vitriolic towards themselves all the fucking time. And I'm just wondering, like, how many people in the future who are going to have chances of getting somewhere are going to be maybe losing those because eventually someone does a Twitter search on them and they find that in the 2020s, they were just writing L plus ratio everywhere and being dicks towards other people everywhere. And that's, you know, that sort of bad karma comes back to bite you in the ass, I think. In the same way
but we also, you know, every human being, Facebook, you know, tells you, like, on this day 9 years ago you wrote this.
You said something fucked up. Yeah, that happens to me as well.
I look at my, because I was like I joined Facebook. The first Facebook obviously started famously in the Ivy League schools with Mark Zuckerberg when they were students, and then expanded. And I was at NYU, which was the first non-Ivy League school added to Facebook. So I was in the first probably 30 to 50,000 Facebook users.
Wow.
That like existed, because it was there were like 9 schools on the East Coast of the US that were Facebook. That was, you had to sign in with a .edu email. It was required that you be a student and all this stuff. And so, I have Facebook memories of Facebook posts that are like 14 years and 15 years old as a result.
Crazy.
And like the shit I wrote as a idiotic 20-year-old is exactly what you would expect of an idiotic 20-year-old. And now, fortunately, Facebook, it's slightly more impenetrable to find those things. But Twitter is no different. If you join Twitter, especially if you join Twitter as a teenager, every teenager in the history of humanity, and or young people and or just people, have said stupid shit. And for the 99% of human history, we didn't have a permanent record of everything that
true.
person uttered. And so it's like, I'm not a vindictive person. I'm not a believer in people. I'm not a believer in a lack of accountability or things like that.
I think people grow and people change, right? Like people grow up.
Exactly. That's
people
the point I'm
become better. That's been my experience as well. It's just one thing that I don't like to see is, I don't know, when people are being dicks towards those who are successful because they think, oh, he's never gonna read that, or they think it's not fair that they're successful and I'm not. So that's kind of the thing that I'm talking about, where I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, that's what people are doing for the most part. They should be doing the opposite, I think.
I think for those kinds of things, I agree. My friend Peter Hollins, who's a fantastic YouTuber and musician and entrepreneur, and he's 100 great things and just a lovely human being. He went viral on Reddit when, many years, probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, something like that. When people would troll him exactly the way you're describing, they would just write things like, "Oh, this is so lame. Like, imagine being this is your life, where you just want to do covers like a cappella style on YouTube, whatever," and probably far worse things. And so he just would go to them and say, "Hey, I appreciate it. Let's talk about it." And it was like they were consistently, and he would screenshot it and share it, and that's what went viral. Of like, these people would backpedal so hard because they never thought he would even see it.
Yep.
And then they were shocked and horrified when and so he very unantagonistically and charitably went to them and be like, "Did you really mean that?" And like 99% would be like, "Dude, no, I'm so sorry. I don't know what the hell, what was wrong with me?" Like, and that's how most people are. That's why I always advocate a charitable outlook, where you go to people, assume the best. It's okay to be wrong. If it turns out they're really an asshole, like, I'm willing to be wrong about that. I'm willing to have the egg on my face of, oh, it turns out they really are a dick, and I should probably ignore them from now on. Because 99% of the time, it will turn out that they either badly misrepresented themselves, or they were having a bad day, and just shouldn't have been on Twitter, and like would be the first to acknowledge it. And I just find that we've developed an uncharitable attitude towards ourselves to other people. Yeah,
that's true.
And I agree. Don't be a dick. But if someone's a dick to you, give them the benefit of the doubt at least once. Because so often people will backpedal and realize, like, this was I'm sorry, this was not me. I don't know what I was doing. So many people. I've seen it so many times. Most people are fundamentally good people. That's the thing. And it's so easy to lose sight of that, where the things that go viral that are the most delicious for quote tweeting or whatever are the worst sides of ourselves. Because we are tribalistic, like tribalistic apes, basically. Yeah. That is what we are. We develop the ability to communicate, but like we're really not that fundamentally different from our ancestors that chimpanzees have in common, and gorillas and orangutans. Like, we're not that different from this pool of the evolutionary genetic pool. And
we like to believe we are, but we're not. We're really not. And we have the same instincts sometimes. But
Yeah, which it's beautiful that we've evolved to the point that we can have those fleeting moments of overcoming that and actually being really wonderful. And never mind landing rovers on Mars and launching things like the James Webb Telescope and writing music and creating video games and like those. But those are in a way that almost like in defiance of our origins, not reflective of how brilliant we are.
Yeah.
It's like we actually managed to climb out of the mud 1 inch more than our sort of colleague simians, as it were, and look what came out of that. How beautiful and amazing. And I
guess in a weird way that is also very necessary. Like even being able to go beyond what they call it, the reptile brain, the part of the brain that gives into fear and all that stuff. The ability to look at that,
pure instinct.
Yeah, the ability to look at that and be like, I'm not going to listen to you today. I'm going to try that thing. I'm going to go and talk to this director. I'm going to go and try to write this song. You know, the ability to go beyond those instincts is what can really change the outlook of our careers, I think, in a way. And I agree with what you said, by the way, about giving people the benefit of the doubt, by the way. Like, I'm the same. Like, people often ask me this, like, hey, Alex, why are you so positive on the internet all the time? Isn't it hard to keep this up? I'm like, keep what up? This is the type of person that I am most times.
I can validate that, yeah.
But the reason why I'm like that is exactly because I fucked up so many times in my life. And I do believe people can change, because me, myself, personally, one of my golden rules is whenever I do something that ends up hurting somebody, and I didn't want to hurt them, or whenever I say something wrong, etc., I don't hold it against me so much. I will be like, okay, that was not nice. Now I need to put out an amount of positive energy and kindness to the world that kind of destroys the negativity I just put out. So for that day, I will be extra kind. And that compensates. And then I'm like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. I fucked up. I fixed it. And the karmic balance has been restored. And that's how I see life. And that's also why I'm very positive, because I fucked up a lot. And I think, yeah, if
by that logic, I'm gonna like steal someone's car, but then I'm gonna go give money to charity and be like, everything's fine.
If you steal someone's car, you better do a lot to repent. But man, one time, a friend of mine in Japan told me that one time someone stole his bike and he was supposed to go to work, and he went to work on his bike every day. And one time someone stole it, and so I arrived late at work. And that made his day so much worse, because of Japan, everybody's so,
very
punctual and stuff. And he comes back home walking and not by bike, and he finds the bike where he was supposed to be in the morning. And there was like a note and a pack of cookies, and the note was like, I'm so sorry I took your bike, but I was late for work and I couldn't miss and blah blah. Here's some cookies to apologize. And that kind of made his day.
Wow.
Yeah. That's Japan, man. People in Japan are so polite about everything. And that I'm not advocating stealing bikes, but I'm saying like things can be forgiven. You can make up for
absolutely
bad moments.
And most things are not as big a deal as we think they are. Just fundamentally. No. Like the average, are you going to die? Whatever is facing you, stress, work, relationship troubles, like the vast majority of things that really get us bent out of shape need to be taken into proportion. And I know the automatic criticism that a line like that can draw of, the more someone touts that, the more they're kind of announcing their inherent privilege to the world. And I don't think that that's a totally baseless claim. I get it. The better off you are, the easier it is to say things are not a big deal, because you're you're not fundamentally facing starvation or whatever. But that's kind of, to me, self-fulfilling of the point I'm making, where, most people are not facing starvation, especially, I would think, most people that are going to be watching this and pursuing a career in video games. And take some time out of your schedule to help those that are facing starvation. Do your part. And now recognize, because especially when you do that, I do a lot of work with a nonprofit here in LA that does we work in inner city schools, and we work with the principals of these underfunded communities to try to really alter the educational outcome of these K through 5 schools.
That's nice.
And nothing puts you in better perspective of how grateful you should be for what you have than when you work with people that have a lot less than you do. And it just it's just a perfect real remembrance. And what I love is that I've been to some places and met, like, I've spent time in the Middle East with kids who were Palestinian refugees who were literally like orphans who had to leave a literal war zone and
Wow.
effectively, imprisonment. And what I love is that none of these kids, they were like sounds like a very callous comparison, but I mean it in the best way. It's like when you see a dog that's been like amputated, it doesn't feel bad for itself. We feel bad for it, but the dog is like wagging its tail and having a good day. That's how I felt about these kids. They looked at we would pass like a another kid on the street who's literally like begging, and they're like, my life's better than theirs. And it's like, from our perspective, it's a matter of a tiny seeming degree that their lives are that different. But yet this was a kid who, he was so cheerful and talented, and like he would dance, like someone's cell phone would like start playing, like the ringtone was like Snoop Dogg, and the kids started dancing and like knew this music and stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, these kids are so full of joy, and yet, it's like, oh man, I got notes. I have to rewrite this cue. Fuck the world. It's just not. We all would just, perspective is just a continuously valuable thing.
Yeah, definitely, man. Wow, I almost feel called out because this is so true. This is so freaking true. That's a very good reminder.
I'm always the first to say, on its worst and most challenging days, this job is still my dream job. But that's not to diminish that those days are stressful. Like, I would never tell someone, like, I always reject the, there are children starving in the world. You shouldn't feel bad about your problems. It's like,
no, I think everybody should be.
Still problems. Like, don't lose empathy just because the maximum total of human experience includes a lot of misery below where you are, doesn't mean that within the realm of your day or your life or whatever, that these are not actual justifiably stressful things or upsetting things. Like, we can't lose empathy for one another over that the same way. So I'm in no way. No,
I agree, but we should reflect on how lucky we are also. That's,
absolutely. I just never, it's too easy to overcorrect and make the takeaway or the lesson, therefore everything needs to be awesome all the time. It's like, no. We're all human.
Like, I like the thought, like the idea of memento mori, like, remember you have to die, because I think that perspective really helps a lot. Like, dude, I've had moments where I was like, I don't know about this music thing and blah blah blah, and then, that memento mori, like, I think I told you the story where I thought I was developing something very bad, and I thought I really was about to die in a few years, and that kind of changed my mindset. It was like, well, fuck, if I'm about to die in 2 years, I might as well just do what I really love. And I changed the way I lived my career. And then I found out I wasn't going to die. The problem I thought was going to happen did not happen. But that pressure still enabled me to make the right choices that changed my life in a way that was very positive. So I really think having that perspective is very liberating. Because on one side, you realize you're very lucky. On the other side, you realize, hey, if I try and it goes wrong, doesn't matter so much in the grand scale of things. Unless you're jeopardizing the life of others. Like, hey, if you have kids, you have to take care of, like, that's a bit of a different scenario compared to if you're guys in your 20s and he's deciding to make music. But definitely, I think we take ourselves too seriously, and maybe we shouldn't.
I couldn't agree more. I think, everybody deals with stresses, and everybody has reasons to feel grateful and lucky, and any ways that we can all help remind each other of that, and give each other more reasons to feel lucky. Like, not to sound overly schmaltzy, but like, you're a guy that makes me feel lucky because you constantly make me think about new things, and I also just look at what you put out in the world, and I'm like, my God, he makes it look so easy. And I know that you work hard. That's the thing. Like, I know that you're, and especially when we talk about the more technical sides of like
Mm-hmm.
YouTube and things like that, it's very obvious that you really know these things beyond some instinctive, like, oh, I just do. You don't bumble through the world going, just, have
Yeah.
fun and don't really pay attention. Like, you're really
Appreciate it.
discerning and you really kind of intellectualize a lot, but you also manage to make the package, the final result look so effortless. And
Thank
so
you,
that,
man.
yeah, just,
Well, I can say
shining
the
that at you.
same about you and your music, man. Like it sounds so understandable, especially like some tracks, like the Journey soundtrack. It just it flows so freaking well. But the amount of effort it took to get to the place where you can even write something like that must have been insane. And not only Journey, even just
It's hard to say.
I'm still jamming to the Pathless too. Like that
Thanks.
soundtrack is amazing, and the what you had to do to conjure it, it's not easy, man. Like putting your ego aside like that.
It's not easy, but that's what's fun, it's the I was just talking tonight with a guy I'm working with on a thing, where I can't really say what it is, so I'll have to be very vague, but basically it's a very, very difficult scene to get right. It's one of those that's like, I said to him, I think this is going to end up being one of the most difficult cues I probably will ever have to write. Like
Wow.
literally ever. Because, and it will never sound like that. To someone who just, is able to see what we make, it will always,
They will get instantly. I get why it sounds like this, and yeah, it makes sense. But for you, it would have been
you
an
know,
enigma.
and if we do our job, it won't look hard. It's just like you with the stuff I was just saying with
Right.
with your bass playing or the YouTube stuff or whatever. Like it's something that just seemingly looks easy and natural. And they'll never appreciate, if we do it right, they'll never appreciate just how delicately balanced this whole thing is and how hard it was to get right. And I remember he said to me on the phone, like literally right before we jumped on, he was like, well, sorry to hang it all on your shoulders because the whole thing really won't work if you don't deliver and pull it off. And he was like, I'm sorry for putting you in that position, but it was, it's just, that's how it is. And I said, dude, are you kidding? I said, this is the kind of thing that, yes, for all of its difficulty, these are the kinds of things that a composer dreams will come across their desk at some point in their career. Something really beautiful and really emotional that you think, I get to attach to, to this thing and try to make a stamp on it. I said,
Man,
it is so worth the
It
challenge.
takes incredible courage, though. Like one thing that we deal with a lot is imposter syndrome. And when you get projects like
Well,
this,
that's true.
especially like I'm experiencing this myself, dude. I'm not someone who doesn't have experience, but still to this day, when I am given certain projects, I still get the feeling of like, me? They're asking me about like, there's no way I can do this. Do you have that feeling still? Like, do you ever feel like, oh my god? Do you still how do you face that? And let's do a few lightning rounds about this question because we've been speaking for 1 hour. I don't want to.
Yeah, it's true. I should run.
all
It's
night.
approaching midnight here.
Yeah.
And I have to fly tomorrow. So, but
Oh, shit.
the long and short of it is once you do it once and you realize I didn't know what I was doing, but somehow I made it to the finish line and I didn't die and it didn't catastrophically end in disaster. I think from that point forward, it's a lot easier because then you just have to remember, I pulled it off that last time. I didn't know what I was doing then. So the key is how to do it that first time. And I don't know the answer to that. I think it probably is hubris and just obliviousness that lets you think I can do this because you don't know any better. And then you get in, you realize how hard it is. You somehow limp across the finish line. And then the second time you remember less the limp and more just that you cross the finish line. And every time I set the goal higher for myself, it's kind of like if I was shooting free throws on a basketball court, and every time the ball goes in, you raise the backboard and the hoop a little bit each time. So I kind of make it more difficult for myself. Like Pathless is a vastly more ambitious score, at least in technical terms and in production terms, than Abzu or Journey, for example. Both of those were far more than what I had done prior to that. And, on and on it goes back until I'm a kid and I don't know, literally don't know what
I
I'm doing.
told you that's what I felt like. I was playing Journey the first time the other day, and while playing it, I was thinking about the other soundtracks you've wrote, like the Pathless and stuff. And I was like, man, Austin has really grown a lot since Journey.
I certainly hope. I try to push myself. You never know. It means a lot that you say that. That the goal is definitely always growth. I don't know if I'm better, but I know if nothing else, have more tools at my disposal than I did 5 years ago, like from a craftsmanship standpoint.
Okay.
So that helps with the imposter syndrome too, by the way. Just knowing that my Swiss Army knife of tricks has grown just by virtue of experience.
Shooting
that
higher.
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if this is correct, but I think snipers aim slightly above their target to hit the target. You don't. You want to always.
Well, that's correcting for gravity, of course. The bullet will
it goes
get
down,
pulled
right? So
by the gravity of the
you
Earth.
always have to shoot a
Absolutely,
bit higher. So I think that's probably a good feeling. And
that's
by the way,
assuming there's no wind, by the way. They have to account for the wind on top of that if they're especially at supremely long range. This is one of those things. As a side note, there's this great channel that's like a YouTube channel. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's this really, really, really nerdy, mostly Star Wars, but like a lot of kind of sci-fi breakdown stuff. And there's this constant meme and this joke about how stormtroopers are super inaccurate in Star Wars, right? So this guy went and he calculated the number of shots that are seen on screen in A New Hope that they fire and the number of confirmed kills, and then compared that to real world average shooting statistics, even for trained soldiers, and came to the conclusion that they are
accurate.
Impossibly accurate. He was like,
wow.
They are so much better than the most trained soldiers in the world, because the truth is, it's actually really hard to place an accurate shot. It was really enlightening video about, you see these, like you play a video game as a sniper or whatever, and you realize it's actually an insanely fucking hard thing to do in real life. Like, the physics involved are nuanced, to say the least. Anyway, this is a tangent, but I just thought that video was hilarious and amazing.
Yes, okay, I'm going to ask you the last few questions, and then we're going to wrap this up. But, okay, in your career, very quickly, did you find yourself saying yes or no more times?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Yes?
It took me a long time to develop any kind of courage to say no, because I was constantly in this feeling of, this job is probably the last one I will ever be offered, so I better say yes. And it was just this constant, like, I just couldn't shake the feeling.
Do you regret it? Did it put you in positions where you were like, that was bad? Like saying yes.
I did overextend myself. At one point, particularly, I did say yes to more than I should have. And then when life outside of my career got tumultuous, it became very difficult to stay on schedule and deliver things on deadline. And I definitely did professional damage to some of my relationships because I had set myself up. I had set myself up for that. So I consider, one of the little cliches of Hollywood, but of any freelance career. It's just, I remember associating this with film scoring, but they always said, your career is not, the best way to evaluate how you're doing progression-wise in your career is not what you're saying yes to, but what you're saying no to.
Right.
And I think that's a absolutely magnificent pearl of wisdom. And it makes sense, because at the earlier days, you should probably say yes to just about everything. It's essentially the beggars can't be choosers mentality.
And it's good practice also.
I stand by it. But that's the thing. You hone your craft. There's so much to learn. There's so much to experience and wisdom and personality types and not to mention that you can make a lot of wonderful friendships by even if someone makes some little low budget thing and then they're like, screw it, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna just shift career, I'm gonna go be an accountant or whatever. Like they're fed up with it. Like, you might still be friends. Like, why do you have to? Your friendship's not contingent on working together. Like, that's you met someone interesting, and that's all well and good. So yes, I'm repeating that sentiment. I know.
No, but it's so important. I think people. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this, is that the value of human relationships, even outside of work.
Oh yeah, there are people that I know I'll never work with that theoretically could hire me. Like, there's one director in particular who lives in London, whose friendship I cherish so much. I love this guy. and he's got a composer he's very loyal to. And I'm never under any misapprehension about that. And I wouldn't want to come in between that, no differently than like I would want to get involved in someone's marriage. You know, like it's they've got a great thing going on. I don't want to disrupt that. And our friendship is completely and totally not dependent on the prospect of working together. Anyway, so yes, I do say no more frequently now, but the reason why I don't actually enjoy it. I like when people make me an offer and they actually say, we want you to work on our thing. It's very affecting to me, and I think it's always a certain, just like what you said a minute ago, like, really, me? I can't ever shake that feeling. But the thing that will make me say no when I choose to is because I don't want to undercut the people I have already before today said yes to.
Yeah.
And if I have to say, if saying yes to this new person means now I have that much less time to honor this person who maybe a year ago offered me a thing and I said yes to, it's like it makes the yes to them less meaningful. And they were here first. They took a swing theoretically on less information about me, that kind of thing. I think it's disrespectful to put them in a position of
getting less of you, getting less of what you promised. Yeah, exactly. Don't half-ass it. I completely agree with that.
Exactly.
Last question.
Anything that does that is not good. Okay,
last question, then I'm gonna let you
go. Grand finale.
I was just curious. What does an average day in the life of a working composer looks like? Like how much time you spend working, how much time you spend studying, and how much time do you have for your private life? Because there's people might be that's one thing that actually scares me, because when I made trailer music, man, I was working when I did that, like as my sole thing, I was working so freaking much and I didn't have much time for anything else. But it was also because I was at the beginning, and that though made me think, man, if the day comes where I transition into video games full time, how much am I going to work? So what is the average for what?
Well, here, my answer is going to sound like a cheat because it's going to kind of not answer it, but it is the actual answer. What I love about this career is that I don't have an average day. Like some days, all I do is talk on the phone. Literally the whole day is nonstop meeting, especially in the pandemic. I've had days where I was on Zoom 8 hours of the day. And then by the end of it, I can't, I tend to write music in the mornings. So if it's a day where I'm writing music, which is hopefully most days, but if it's a day where I have a lot of calls in the morning, I have a real hard time spooling up the engine if I've been nonstop in calls, and then at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, it's like, okay, finally. The only time I can ever really get good writing done in that case is if the deadline has just forced my brain into a mode where there's no other option. Yeah. But generally, my fantasy is I get up at usually about 5:30 in the morning, and I come into the studio, and I will, if I can put in 6 hours of writing before noon, I can get a crap load done, and then I have calls or whatever all afternoon, or go see a movie or play games or read, or there's a million things that I can do with that time, or and sometimes I'll keep writing, or whatever. But I have a tendency to like writing in the morning. So, but some days I don't have control over that, or some days I'll think, okay, well, I really want to get something done, and I only have. There's an hour here because today is got a bunch of calls sandwiched in of planning a project that we're going to start next year, finishing up a thing, doing a thing like this, or making stuff for my YouTube channel. So I every day is wildly unpredictable in that way. Sometimes it's recording music, sometimes it's writing music, sometimes it's going back and looking for files because I'm like, oh, I just had this idea for YouTube, but I need to go find this one QuickTime file that I think is on this hard drive, and then it's like there went an hour just looking for that, and it's like that's the only time I did that activity this month. But today was the day of that, and part of what I love is that I don't have a 9 to 5 level of regularity. I don't. This is not my home. I work at a studio that's in a commercial space that I rent like an office, and I don't even take the same route coming here every day. Like I'll some days I'm like, this time I'm going to go left here, and then I'm going to cut south. Or this
I
time I'm
love
going to
that,
do
man.
this, or like I ride a bike, or I'll drive or Uber, or like or walk, or
Dude, that really
like
helps. Like people, I think, underappreciate how much this helps because it kind of puts your mind in a different frame. Like if you do the
exactly.
same thing every day, you get in autopilot mode in a way, and even the way you
Exactly.
think gets autopilot. But if you just
Yep.
change things up, that really helps. But I like that you have this. There's still a bit of structure though. I like this thing that you have this idea of like, hey, I work best in the morning for writing music, so I will try to wake up at 5, get in the studio early, and write music in the morning. I've noticed for me that also helps sometimes getting up and writing in the morning because you feel like a winner if you wake up at 5 first thing. Second,
Yeah, exactly.
your mind is fresh. You just came off of your dreams and you're full of creativity. You don't have many thoughts. So when you create in that with that mind frame, it really helps being more creative. Otherwise, for me personally, also working at night sometimes can help because when it's so late at night, my brain is so tired to be self-judgmental. So
That's
it's
so true.
almost so you might come up with some ideas that you're like, oh, this is shit, but I don't care. Let me do it. And then you wake up the morning after. Sometimes they're still great. So
Oh, 100%. Yeah, ways that you can kind of outsmart yourself are always very empowering. I totally agree. I remember I did a movie once where I had about 3 weeks to write the score,
wow.
and we were recording like this lush orchestra
How
at
many
Warner Brothers
minutes was it?
stage, and it wasn't bad. It was I think 40 at most. I think it was
Okay.
just shy of 40, like
Mm.
38 or something. It was modest. It was not. It was nothing remotely crazy for movie sake. Like 3 weeks is. It's not uncommon to have 3 weeks to write over an hour of music in movie terms. Like it's very typical. So this was in a way kind of luxurious. But I remember as we got towards the end, I was definitely starting to burn the midnight oil, and I remember there was this one cue where I had written it at like 3 in the morning, and it was a very simple scene. It was actually a very emotionally complex scene, but the staging of the scene, it's like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then it's over. And it was
Mm.
maybe, I don't know, a minute and change long. So in the grand scheme of things, this was not particularly complex, but I just remember I was like falling asleep. I was writing it and kind of dozing off. And so the next morning, I looked at it. I remember the director called me and he was like, "I love this cue. This is so effective." And I remember, and I went and watched it, and I was like, "I don't remember writing this."
Wow.
It's like I was so half conscious that
Jesus.
that it's like a person came in and wrote it, and then I just sat down at the desk and was looking around, going, "Who else has keys to get in here?" It was very strange, but it's funny how it really taught me a lot because I thought
Yeah.
this cue, there's no ego, it's like all the normal bullshit filters of like someone asked me on a comment on one of my YouTube Q&A videos. They go, "Do you ever leave behind little like Easter eggs from a music theory standpoint for future scholars to discover?" And I laughed. I was like, what an ego thing. Like the idea of like when history is studying 2M7 of this independent film,
They will find.
they'll find like, aha, he inverted like, it's so ridiculous. And so but what's funny is we all have versions of that where it's like this cue, like the thing that I'm guilty of now. I think it's a positive thing, but like it's definitely getting in the way in a way is I'm always thinking, I want to make sure that this is interesting for the musicians to play. I want to make sure that they really will enjoy recording this. I can't ever get that thought out of my head. But the truth is, that is a level of interference. If I was truly and totally solely focused on the scene, like I wouldn't technically I care about that. And like hopefully good music that they want to play still comes out, but it wouldn't be a thing I kind of actively think about. So we all have versions of the inner voice getting in the way to varying degrees. And that experience really taught me the power of how unpretentious and nice a piece of music can be if you just clear the noise and find
Yeah.
So I've spent the last 15 years trying to figure out ways to do that for myself. I take a lot of walks. That's another thing to answer your previous question of of like I will leave the studio in the middle of the day all the time and just wander the neighborhoods and like listen to podcasts or just
I should do
listen and
that more
say hi to the
myself as well.
We live in
Sorry,
like
you
one of
said.
the most beautiful cities in the world. It's great for that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, man, I I could keep talking to you for several hours, but I know you're a very busy person, very busy
Well,
man.
you as well. I
Yeah.
appreciate you getting up early. It is likewise 20 to midnight, and I gotta get home and pack a bag.
All right,
Um, but
man.
always a pleasure, and really happy to be supporting our friends at the Game Music Festival. They're so awesome. I love that they're putting this thing on in London. I so wish I could be there
Yeah.
for the Cuphead and for Gareth's both those shows. All their previous ones have been terrific, and so anyway, a lot of love to them, and thanks to them for asking us to do this.
Yeah, I hope those of you who are gonna enjoy the show are gonna, appreciate those, and I hope you guys have learned a lot from Austin here. And I know this is probably not have been like a super easy conversation to follow because we've been rambling all about. But the thing is, this is the tough thing. This is why they don't teach this in schools. It's so hard to quantify this in a program or whatever. It's just I suppose a big part of working in this industry is like just being a good human, and taking chances and being excited and being insightful and all these things. So I hope you've learned something from that, and I hope that's gonna help you out. And yeah, guys, enjoy the rest of GMF and talk soon. Bye bye.
Hooray!